Good evening. I'm just going to think out loud for a few minutes, right? And the object around which I'm going to be thinking is not necessarily just to spoil the voting, but the whole situation that's going on in Ireland at the moment, right? And in other Western shores as well. But we're in Ireland, I'm in Ireland. So that's where my thoughts dwell largely, right? And what I'm seeing is something that bothers me, right? And I'm mulling it over and turning it around and pulling it apart and looking at it and trying to reconfigure it in a way that makes sense, right? And ultimately then I bring it back to myself and I ask, am I just so belligerent a person that, or so negative a person that I can't recognize something positive when I see it, right? That there's a movement, an upswelling, right? And a combining thought pattern regarding the spoil the vote situation, and the people that seem to be coalescing around the pushing of it, right? The dragging it into the mainstream, if you will, and popularizing it and selling it in a nice professional class looking way, right? Am I so far gone that I've become so contaminated with the way things have been going that I cannot see a positive out of something that is a positive, right? So is that where I'm at? So I have to dwell on that and I have to think on that. And I don't think that that's, obviously, I don't think that that is the conclusion, right? And again, so if I don't, in order to avoid being biased or as biased as I can in my own thinking of wanting to see myself in the best positive light or the best possible light, I need to pick it apart and be able to recognize and explain why I have an issue with what is going on and what exactly is going on that is causing me to have an issue. And so I'll offer up a couple of experiments, ideas, theories, whatever you want, right? Ways of looking at the world or perceiving of the world, right? And one of them is, you're probably familiar with it, is the 100 monkey effect, right? And I think the story goes that some monkeys started washing off, I think it's potatoes or something in the sea, right? And before you know it, all the monkeys start doing the same thing. And the interesting part of that is monkeys on different islands started doing the same thing as well, right? So monkeys that didn't have, as far as we know, that didn't have contact with the original set of monkeys that were doing it, they started behaving the same way. They started thinking, essentially, and acting in the same way, right? That's interesting. Another experiment is around the same theme, where there were rats, also nearly always rats, right? Poor rats. They were ran through an underwater maze, okay? And it took, I think it was 167 attempts for the first group of rats to be able to navigate the maze and find a way out. And they'd done this experiment with generation after generation of rats. And they found that as the generations go, it took these rats a shorter amount of goes to be able to navigate the water maze, right? And there's also examples of animals of the same species in different parts of the world appearing to attain a certain knowledge or a certain skill set at a quicker rate than previous generations, right? Because when it's rats of the same generation and lineage, you can understand that as a biological hand-me-down, right? So the DNA or the genetics of the rats are passed down just as we take our parents' genes, right? And all the epigenetics that goes along with that, the certain beliefs, traits, tendencies, right? Acquired characteristics, as they call it. that we can inherit, if you want, skills that our parents built up along the course of their life, just as the rats do. But when you're talking about animals that are separated by islands or seas or even different countries, appearing to acquire the same adaptability and the same proficiency in new skills when they're apart from each other, when appears on the surface, there's no biological or physical explanation for it, you have to start looking elsewhere, right? And that elsewhere has been explained by a number of people, and in particular Rupert Sheldrake, right? And I won't go into it, but the point of it is that a certain animal or species, once they've developed the ability to complete something more effectively, regardless of where their relatives are, right? So regardless of where rats of the same species or different animals, different, what would you call them? Rats on a different continent of the same species, right? They appear to acquire the same skill set. So essentially, a person in Australia, if they get good at whatever it is, right, a new knowledge is unfurled and developed and matured and embodied and internalized and understood, then people across the world, it will become easier for them to pick up that same thread, right? So that leads me onto ideas. And the restrictions on ideas, and we've been awash with that in Ireland for centuries. You can go back to St. Patrick if you want, his desire to rid Ireland of a certain set of ideas 1500 years ago or so, we're told. You can then bring that forward to 1200s, where the English were given permission by the Pope to invade Ireland, capture Ireland, hold Ireland, and extract the papal tax from the Irish people, and to assure that a certain idea or ideology, belief system, was kept in control in perpetuity in Ireland, right? You can then flash forward to the 1920s and 30s, when Eamon de Valera and Charles McQuaid censored Irish people. Literature was censored. James Joyce, no. Right? Ideas. The restriction of ideas in Irish people, or on Irish people. And my concern and my problem, and it will be a problem with me until the day I die. Because I believe that we are born as babies, obviously, right? We're not born fully formed or whatever, or fully grown. But we're born as individuals. We're conceived as individuals, right? And we're given, through the beauty of life, the ability to our heart to beat, our mind to think, our mouth to speak. That doesn't belong to anybody else. So when I see anybody, myself included, because sometimes I speak off the cuff and I might throw out something that sounds like I'm trying to tell you what to think. It's never my motivation, right? But when I see people begin to form around the momentum, the zeitgeist of the Irish mind, right? The upswell of Irish emotion and sentiment against an adversary. When I see that begin to slowly get morphed towards something at the behest of a few people, that bothers me. It bothers me. Because I'm all on board with tackling the issues that are in this country and tackling a number of issues that people are not even aware are issues, right? But there's a certain way that I want to see that done. And I want to see that done with respect for the fact that each of us, as I said, has our own mind, our own heart, and our own mouth. Okay? And our own intelligence. Our own ability to discern and decide for ourselves. So when I see people begin to dictate what you should or shouldn't do, how you should view something, what you should believe, the type of beliefs that you should reject, without an explanation as to why you should reject them, or at least why they're not positive for you. I have a serious problem with that. On top of that then, when I see people begin to reject, disregard, and show a lack of understanding, a lack of appreciation, and I would say even a lack of empathy, for people who are choosing, given the current climate we're in, where, call it what you want as well, there's a war going on here in Ireland, and our future is not guaranteed. And given the current trajectory of where we are in Ireland, our future is by no means certain as Irish people. That is the reality we are facing. And there's no one vote that's going to change that. There's no spoiling the vote that's going to change that. And that doesn't mean that people shouldn't spoil their vote. By all means, do whatever it is that feels right with you. But do it from an informed position, where you know exactly why you're doing something. And you can explain it clearly why you're doing it. Right? And if everyone else in the country decided to do the opposite of what you're doing, you would still do the thing that you decided on doing, because it feels right to you. Right? Not because it seems popular or seems like the rebellious thing to do. Don't fall for that. Or fall for it if you want, right? But at least understand that you're falling for it. Okay? Because no one wants to fall for anything, really. No one wants to be the open fool. But when I see people, again, try and dictate what people should or shouldn't do, without thorough explanations, without making the case, when I see people begin to moralize, right? Don't associate with that type of behavior because I find this behavior thuggish, or I don't like it because I see it as whatever you want to call it. When I see people begin to moralize like that in an attempt to colour or control or dictate other people's actions, I have a serious problem with that. I don't see that working out in any positive way, okay? Because I see that as another form of control. I see that as another rigidity of mind that is in no different fundamentally from the one that is being forced on us now, that people are reacting against. You're just swapping one for another. But because fundamentally the issue at play here is that your mind is the weapon. And there's a concerted effort to disarm you by taking your mind and convincing you that you are making up your own mind when in fact you are not. You're going along with things based on whatever. Either it is the safe thing to do, or it seems the rebellious thing to do, or it's the popular thing to do, right? Or it's the more financially beneficial thing to do. Whatever the case is. And each of us have to decide what category we fall into. You know? That's why we always have to question our motivations for things. But my main issue, or one of the main issues that I see, is the vilifying of those who are under threat, which happen to be, right, and you can bring class thing into it if you want, because I think it's valid. There's people who, those who suffer nearly the most immediate consequences of the decisions the politicians and big business owners and all that stuff, not to be just writing off millionaires or whatever, but big, massive companies, conglomerates that are in bed with government and forming policy to the betterment of each party, right? They're the last to feel the squeeze and feel the pressure of the decisions that they make. It's the poor people. It's the people in inner cities, right, that have to live amongst most people, where most of the ill effects of this sick society permeate. It's the poorest of people who have no choice, who have limited choices in terms of being able to move away from terrible situations, right? It's those people that get hit the hardest and get hit first. And they, because they're going to be years ahead of the sustained experience of sickness in society, they will react first. And if their reaction is one that is deemed violent or thuggish by people who are a little bit more detached from the reality in terms of immediacy of where we are in this country, so be it. So be it. It's not for me to come and say you shouldn't do that, right? Or this behavior is X, Y, and Z. Because there's a difference between needless violence and then a reaction to violence upon you. So when you have people that are trying to say that they're speaking for the Irish people, they're speaking for those who feel they've lost their voice, they're speaking for those who feel they've no ability to stand up to what's going on in this country. But then in the next sentence, they disregard and reject a good chunk of people whose reaction isn't to their liking. I don't see how they can say that they're on the side of Irish people. Which Irish people? The ones you like? The ones who behave in a way that you approve of? Are you starting to see how these people, or this sort of thinking, is no different than the thinking that goes on right now, from the government to the media the whole way down? So long as you play ball and you adhere to the system and you play by the rules that have been thrown at you, you're okay. You're accepted. You might even benefit from it. But as soon as you step out of that line, that moral framework in which these people are looking at things, you're to be rejected and vilified and denounced and condemned when they don't live the life that you do. How dare they say these things while trying to prop themselves up as speakers of the people? A total lack of understanding. There will always be people that are more prone to violence than others. You only hope that it is a smaller amount of people than a larger amount of people. Or maybe you don't, right? If there's a larger number of people that are more okay with violence, then things will probably balance itself out more than what we're seeing today. So the point I bring up, I just reject, right? I don't believe that to be true. I don't know. Okay? There's a case to be made either way. But you would hope that the people that are more familiar and comfortable maybe in violence are not needlessly violent. And knowing that there's always going to be people that are a little bit more closer in proximity to violence, to kicking off, or to reacting physically, we'll say, right? Never mind the violence. Violence is a stupid word, because it paints a wrong picture of it. Those who are more quicker to react physically, right? You're always going to have them people. So knowing this, You have to accommodate them. You have to accommodate them, because if you refuse to make an attempt to accommodate people who are of that ilk, because people are different, people's fuses are different, people react emotionally different to things, right? React differently. You have to accommodate these people. There are boys and girls as well that are more prone, and you can see it in nature, right? You can see it in childhood. I've had friends growing up, and you can see, and it would have been said that they're not long for this world, just based on their nature. They're wild. Not bad, but wild. And many of them people are no longer here because they weren't long for this world. Right? Because they weren't accommodated. But you can see this. There's wild streaks in people, and Irish people particularly, right? There's a wildness in some Irish people, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. But when you live in a society that tries to crush any bit of difference, that wildness gets rinsed out of people. And it becomes a little more isolated and less seen than it previously would have been. And when something becomes a little more alien, it comes with a little bit of fear. It can evoke fear in people because they're not familiar with it. So they condemn it and they begin to moralize about it because they don't understand it. They can't see the world that way. So they deny and reject the inclusion and the accommodation of people, their own people, because they're a little bit too wild for them. If we are to build anything positive in this country in terms of a society, we need to accommodate all stripes. All stripes. So long as each individual is not trying to ruin or dictate or control or steal anything from any other person. And many people will write that off instantly and say, that's idealistic. That'll never happen. How do you know? How do you know we did not have that before? You don't. Many Irish people are clueless about the history we had in this land. All we know is St. Patrick and after that. We've been here for tens of thousands of years prior to that. Did we not have a culture of our own then? Did we not have a society of our own then? Did we not have tribes of our own then? Did we not have law and sense of our own then? Did we not have a society that accommodated all types of people? All types of Irish people. And some blow-ins. Right? Of course we did. And the wild men of Ireland, the wild boys of Ireland, they were recognised as such early, and they were guided, and they were revered, and they were held up as special in their way, right? As all people were. The smiths, the medics, right? The healers, the diviners, those who performed rituals and ceremonies, the speakers, the poets, the songs, the singers, right? Those who made the potions. They were all held up. They were all held up, and they were all revered across society based on their own peculiarities, as were the wild boys. They were called the Fianna. And you can see this in Irish history. Continuously, you have these little upsurges of wildness in man. And they take on different names across the centuries and the generations. But they were known as the Fianna. And their job was to patrol Ireland and administer justice, not based on some legalese nonsense that we have today. That's devoid of morality and common sense. It's a system that is self-inclusive and self-justifying. It's a nonsense. Just because something is legal does not make it correct or moral. But these lads, their job was to uphold and administer justice across the land. It was to stop pirates, thieves, murderers, real criminals. It was to stop that. They would explore Ireland during the summer, live out wild, sleep under trees under the sky. And in the winter, they would be put up by the Irish people. Right? These people had to be excellent in their physical capabilities. They had to be excellent in their understanding of poetry and story. Why? Because it was from the stories that are thousands and thousands of years old that the moral code on which they stood and on which they administered was derived. The stories kept the moral code, kept the common sense of flow. Our stories were our law. Because our law was the fundamental experience of all previous generations crystallized into little myths, into poems that people had to remember. Right? That's what we did with the wildness in men back then. We held them up in seriously high esteem and gave them immense responsibility of the land. We didn't try and squelch the wildness out of them and tame them, neuter them, castrate them and make them eunuchs, which is what we see going on here. So when you see these bold leaders of Irish people come out and condemn those who might throw a bottle or a rock, understand what you're listening to. You're listening to the castrators of wild men. And in a time as today, we need all the wildness we can get. Because if you think of it yourself individually, how close are you to responding physically to anything? If someone comes up and asks you for your wallet, what do you say? No? Okay. What if they tell you to give it to them? What if they push you a little bit? What do? Do you push back? Do you try and ring the guards? Do you try and walk away? It's easy to denigrate and downplay the need and the ability to respond physically to certain situations when you've spent all your life trying to avoid those situations. Right? It doesn't make you any better than someone because you don't believe in that. There's no honor in that. The honor is in the person who's capable of managing themselves physically, but uses it for good purposes, only for defensive purposes. There's a difference. So when you're seeing people come out and dismiss totally people who are reacting in a more physical way, instead of trying to accommodate that and trying to understand that and try and give that some direction, try and guide it. You're dealing with grown men here who are talking about younger men reacting in a younger man way. And their reaction to that is not to foster that and guide that. It's to reject it and say, have nothing to do with that. That's a coward of a man to me. That's not an adult male. That man has nothing to offer but his moralism. Right? Look how great I am because I look down my schnoz at this. You don't understand what's going on. You've no understanding of psychology. You've no understanding of the Irish mind. Because if we reject our ability to move and defend ourselves physically, you're done. You're there for the picking. The vultures are circling. They're not afraid of you. And also, on a strategic level, just talking strategic, right? Just talking strategy. If we are in this situation, which I believe we are, that we have the Irish people and some offshoot of Irish people that are intent on the total destruction of all that we find well, would you not consider those people an enemy? Sure you would. So if your response to the crystallization of what your enemy has been pouring onto you, right? If your response to that is to say, we don't believe in violence, we will never defend ourselves physically, we will condemn anyone that defends themselves physically, you're a farm animal at that stage. You're a pet. You are a pet. The difference between a wild dog and a pet is that you know full well your pet will never bite you. The wild dog, you're not so sure. Which one commands more respect out of you? Your pet might command more love from you, but the wild dog, I'm sure, will command more respect from you. So think of that. Be careful of people who are trying to direct what you should be thinking, how you should respond, without making the case for it. And if they do make a case for it, evaluate that yourself and make up your own mind about it. Because if we're to move forward in any serious way, as a people, as a nation, we have to accommodate all emotions. We just do. It's as simple as that. Because if we don't, we're cutting off a massive part of ourselves. The very part that would come in your hour of need to defend you physically when you can't. That's what's going on. And I don't think we can deal with that. I don't think we need that. I think we can accommodate. And for the grown men that are around, we can take some of these young fellas and show them a better way, a more productive way of getting what they want, right? We can channel the wildness in them. Don't condemn them. They've already been condemned and forgotten. And these leaders that are popping up now, they're going to do the exact same thing. And we wonder why things aren't well in this country.